Hi, Ollie. Hi, guys.
Hi, Marcos. Nice
Right.
to see you again.
We're back
Yeah.
with Nathan. I mean, in fact, we haven't gone anywhere because we're filming this in one continuous chunk. But for you guys, it's a new episode. So what we're doing in this episode, if you haven't seen the previous one, please go back and watch the previous episode where we talk with Nathan about the Southern Tropical Zodiac, what the hell it is, how you use it, why you would even use it. And in this episode, we're going to be looking at some examples, some practical examples of how Nathan has used it in practice. And what it looks like. So, Nathan, have you got a chart or just an example you
Yes,
want to talk
but
about?
this was a horary chart where, okay, the person came and asked me about G's afflictions, okay, and this is the flipped chart in Southern Tropical
Right.
Zodiac.
First, Nathan, who is G? Is G their friend or their partner or?
Yeah, so G is the client's mother, all
Right.
right?
Okay. Okay.
But I try to stay away from derived houses as much as I can.
Okay. So,
But
question for you then, because it's a medical one. Did the client have their mother's permission? Did their mother know that they were coming to ask you about their health?
the mother's also a client of mine.
Perfect. In that case, because that obviates the whole thing. So for anyone not familiar with horary, I'm just going to set it and then I'm going to shut up and let you go, Nathan. I won't keep butting in, promise.
Okay.
But despite my northern tropical Aries sun, I will try and shut up. But yeah, we've got the Leo rising here. So in traditional horary, it's really important to work out who is who. So the querent, the person asking the question, is usually represented by the ascendant sign and its ruler. But and in this case, because they're asking about their mother, you might think, oh, look at the 10th house and its ruler, the house of the mother. As Nathan's just pointed out, if it's a medical question, and if the person who is being asked about has given consent, then they are the first house, because the person coming to you asking about it is really just a go-between. They're a proxy for the person who is actually wanting to know about their health. So, so you can go ahead and use the ascendant and its ruler.
Yeah.
All right.
So my approach is that the ascendant is the entry point, okay? And however you want to define that is up to the practitioner. In this case, when I see, so again, it's a flipped zodiac. So the ascendant ruler is in the 10th house, which traditionally is mother. I was like, oh, the question is about somebody's mother. Great, chart is radical. Let me move on in my life. So in that context, and there's other things I mentioned about the sun, but that's a very simplistic check. I always want to check that the ascendant and things to do with the ascendant and the time of the ascendant, as Marcus and Ollie will know, is relevant to the question.
Yeah, is the chart describing some of
Yes.
the context of what you're being asked about? Yeah.
Is it radical?
Is it radical? Correct. And the sun is squaring the ascendant, so there's tension and there's all of that going on. Anyway, so client's mother had been complaining about abdominal pain for about 2 weeks, roughly from the middle of October. These are two very recent stories I've done. She visited the psychiatrist the morning of the 31st of October, whereupon it was discovered she had hypercalcemia. That means a lot of excess of calcium in the body. And upon medical advice, was admitted to hospital sometime that night. Upon medical examination and testing, it was found that the hypercalcemia, which had caused pancreatitis, inflammation of the pancreas, and further tests and observation was required to ascertain the reason for the hypercalcemia. So that was the background to the question. All right.
Was it? I'm gonna. Okay, no, I'll shut up. Carry on, because I think I think I have some idea about what it might be, but
yes,
is it parathyroid, hyperparathyroidism, something?
I had thought about that.
Okay.
But we're waiting for the tests because I see the Taurus and all those things, right? So, but yes, I think we're coming to all those things. So, alongside these developments, a CT scan revealed there to be nodes or nodules along the aorta and near the esophagus. A biopsy of the nodes is scheduled once the acute pancreatitis is being brought under control. The nodes may or may not be associated with hypercalcemia and may be a separate issue entirely, because that's what you would normally think. I didn't see typical cancer signatures and relayed this to the client. And indeed, the biopsy of the nodes have since revealed that they are not cancerous. So now the first step interpretation here, I looked to this sixth house. The sixth house here is Capricorn, and the ruler is Saturn in Virgo, which shows pancreas. Virgo is connected to the pancreas. And it's trying the sun in the 10th house. The 10th house shows treatment. That is the current, it was currently being dealt with at the time. The inflammation, the sun, the inflammation that is trining that Saturn in that organ of the pancreas is the actual treatment that is ongoing at right now, because there's a planet in the 10th house trining the 6th house ruler. So the inflammation as the acute urgent issue was apparent at the time of the consult. Again, it's showing the radicality of the chart. Then Saturn is also the term ruler of the ascendant, and it also rules the 6th house. So that was important to see. The problem is that Mercury, because I see my thought process is the ruler of the 6th house is showing the disease, and its ruler gives me more information. Now, the problem here is that Mercury, who rules the Saturn, also rules the Saturn is in the 2nd house, right? That made me say that there's a food cause. There's a food cause related to this issue with the pancreas, which would make sense. It's a digestive organ in the digestive system of the body. As well as the Mercury rules also the Neptune on the 3rd house cusp here, which is squaring the moon Venus, Venus being the 3rd house ruler for breathing. So therefore, I said this Neptune influence here on the 3rd house cusp and Mercury's rulership of both Saturn and Neptune is causing people to conflate these things, where actually in typical Neptune fashion, it's a misdirect. So I said the breathing issue is a misdirect, which can lead to a misdiagnosis, and I advised the client along these lines. So I said to them, basically, there are two separate things happening. Okay, they're not connected to each other, and treat it that way. Okay, because they had a lot of questions and she had a lot of anxiety about, and the breathing and, is it like a big toxicity thing? Is it systemic and all these things? From the horary, I expected, therefore, to see some Moon Saturn themes because Saturn is in the 2nd house, which is about food, eating, because the food-related themes have come up. Due to the dignity of Mercury in this chart, who rules the 6th house ruler, and the accidental strength of the ruler of the ascendant in the 10th house of the treatment, I concluded that all matters of treatment would end well if communication is open and transparent, because Gemini is showing the outcome. There is no, the immediate outcome. There is, the methodological, procedural outcome. There is no connection between the ascendant ruler, the sun, and the 6th house ruler or the 8th house ruler in a negative way. There is a connection of Sun and Saturn, but I've already described that. There's nothing
and
that
it's
is
separating as well, isn't it? Nothing. So, yeah.
The Sun has gone past, so it's moved on. Yes, and to consider otherwise, and therefore all these issues arising will be well managed. That is what I advised the client.
Nice. So, what? I mean, this is great, wonderful example, and very clear. I mean, what in terms of I can see just looking at the chart in terms of the diagnostic pieces of this. Definitely, the ascendant ruler being in Taurus might speak to potentially some inflammation in the throat. And I can certainly see the bit about the 6th house ruler, Saturn in Virgo. That is very clear. That's the left hypochondrium, which is where the pancreas is situated. It's also connecting, as you say, to the food, the 2nd house, the house of food, and the throat again. So it's the same region of the body. So that all fits. And of course, if this chart were flipped, if it were in the non-southern tropical version, none of that would hold true. The thing that is interesting to me, though, is if we didn't flip the chart, I'm mentally just flipping the signs. So we had Aquarius rising and Cancer on the cusp of the 6th. The sign on the cusp of the 6th house would usually describe a part of the body that is afflicted. And so Cancer, I would think the stomach or lungs might be afflicted. but I mean, I think from what you'd said before, I'm not thinking this breaks your system. What I'm thinking is you said from your data analysis that when you looked at your own hit rate, you were about 60% using the non-flipped Zodiac and about 80+% using it flipped. So this isn't going to be the case that if you carry on using the ordinary tropical Zodiac in the Southern Hemisphere, that you're going to get everything wrong or that nothing will fit. It's just, I think what you're arguing, if I don't want to put the word, so correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're arguing is that it will fit better if you transpose it in this way.
One point, just I've got very interested to see the natal chart, which I find more interesting in this, because
Yes.
you regard astrology as a sort of oracle, and Nathan is asking you the question, what is wrong with this patient? And the oracle knows he's using the flipped chart. Surely you could argue as a system of divination, it's going to give him the answer in this flipped chart. And if
That's why I
someone
want to
else
show the
will ask the
natal.
question, I mean, again, we're getting into the sort of metaphysics of astrology here, which is why the natal chart I find more interesting. I mean, this is fascinating as well, and it's a lovely. I mean, the second house and the Saturn in Virgo is beautiful.
Yeah.
But do we have time to look at the natal chart? Because that would be
Yeah,
very
no, we have
fascinating.
it.
I think we
It's easy because I'll
definitely
the
do.
points
Yeah.
later. Yeah. So, the point I want, what I'm saying, Marcus, is that it makes your life easier and you get to the answer faster.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Yeah.
I would struggle with the northern tropical zodiac here to get to pancreas as the acute issue.
Okay. Yeah,
Right?
I can go with that. I can see why you would.
So
yeah,
it's those kind of, it's the quickness of it.
Yeah.
Part of fortune is also in Virgo, and
and
it shows the food.
as I say, I've been paying
So-
attention to your example charts here and there for a number of years, so I'm already convinced. But yeah, so let's have a look at the natal one.
You'd have that. Now, this is the natal chart of the patient, okay? And it's in the southern tropical zone. All right. Now, I have seen the moon is in fall in the 6th house.
Yeah.
It is the 2nd house ruler, again, indicating food, diet. It also happens to be the 3rd house ruler, about breathing. So again, you see there's a conflation happening here with breathing and food being indicated with illness at the same time. And that's exactly what happened with the horary. Both the breathing issue and the food issue have come up at the same time, as the natal promise shows. The opposition to Saturn, who's the 8th house ruler in the chart, shows this is a negative lifestyle issue that will have long-term and chronic consequences. So now, I must put a caveat here. When rulers of opposite signs are conjunct or oppose each other, it cannot be a basis of comparison between the two zodiacs. Because you'll either see Taurus over here or Taurus over there, right?
Okay.
In that opposition aspect, you'll bring in the Taurus somehow. So my point is that, so just that's a point about the Scorpio moon. That's one factor. There's 3 things I look at for health: moon, the sun, and the ascendant ruler.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course, the relative strength of 6th house ruler, ascendant ruler, etc. Right. The second point here is breathing issues are compounded by Mercury, who naturally indicates breathing, also being in the 6th house, also being the ascendant ruler, and also being combust.
Yeah.
Okay. The sun being the 4th house ruler in the 6th house shows poor circulation breathing due to sedentary lifestyle, because 4th house is where you rest. 10th house is where you work. So the sun as the 4th house ruler combusting the ascendant ruler, which is Mercury, shows that the poor circulation and breathing is due to sedentary lifestyle issues. Then the combustion of the ascendant ruler Mercury, together with the Saturn opposition moon, also all in the 6th house, I confirmed to the client that her mother had always been suppressed and restricted since childhood, without much care and attention, which only fed the negative habits of food and limited movement in general. So the triggers have come from that, because I saw the Saturn in the 12th house opposing the moon in Scorpio, and I wanted to confirm, was the connection with family happy and hunky-dory, or was it not? And it was very Scorpionic. So A burning sun is in the 6th house, so the mood of the 6th house is that it's on fire to begin with. I know you're seeing a Scorpio there, but I am seeing fire that is burning. All these afflictions in the 6th house occur in a sign of Mars, and
Yeah.
Mars is angular in a fire sign. All these point to inflammation tendency very quickly.
Yes.
As a tendency in the person. The 6th house ruler being Venus, actually, the 6th house ruler is Venus, placed in the 5th house, which shows the function of digestion, shows that all those issues are going to come to bear upon, because sickness originates in some part in the body and manifests somewhere else in the body. The source of illness is not where it manifests all the time necessarily. The source of illness is different usually from where it manifests. So this is showing that the Venus is showing that all those issues about the Scorpio, Moon, and Mercury and all that is manifesting, being brought to one's attention through a 5th house function of health, which is digestion. And of course, Venus is in Virgo, which is what? The pancreas. If there's a pancreas
Yes.
part about
Yeah.
digestion, it is Virgo. So it's a very straight interpretation. Further, Venus being in Virgo shows the pancreas. In addition, Venus being at the bending of the nodes indicates one of two things. Either the organ is going to be removed, has to be removed, or it will have self-harm, consume itself.
Interesting. Just
These
a
are the
quick
two
point
things
there.
I've
Just
noticed.
sorry, Nathan. Just a quick point there, just for any viewers or listeners who don't know what the bending of the nodes is. It's when a
Yes.
planet is squaring the north and south node. It's sort of halfway in its voyage between the two eclipse points, and it's almost like that that planet, whatever it represents, is at a critical juncture. So sorry.
So exactly. So in charts for medical that I've seen, either that organ it's fated to be removed, or it is fated to consume itself.
Interesting.
And the consuming itself, see, because Mercury is disposing the Venus, again, I look at the ruler of the 6th house ruler for more information about functionality. I know that the Mercury function in the pancreas is not happening well, because the Mercury who disposes the Venus has gone back into the 6th house. So what is happening here is the mercurial function in the pancreas, which is the ducts, the entrances and exits, because Mercury is a transport function in an organ, is blocked. Its toxicity has gone up. This is the Scorpio part of it. And the blockage is in the transport within the pancreas, such that the pancreatic enzymes are not moving out of the pancreas as they should, thereby consuming the organ and leading to inflammation. Right.
Well,
Now, again, this is how you would expect to read a chart. It's just very straightforward.
wonderful.
My advice was that if they cannot clear the pathways, they may move to remove the whole organ or portions thereof, because the planet of the bendings for me, it's something that either has to come out or will come out, or
That's really interesting, Nathan. I hadn't observed that. Is that something that you've got from your own observations, or is that from some rule in Jyotish or Vedic astrology, or is it?
It's just observations.
Okay, amazing.
Since the 6th house ruler in the chart, Venus, also rules the Saturn. Okay?
Yeah.
Which is in the 12th house. The native is advised to not ignore the necessary lifestyle changes required to turn us around, because 12th house is what you have to sacrifice. And if Taurus is in the 12th house, sorry, you got to sacrifice things you like to eat. Okay? The good things in life, Saturn in Taurus is saying, well, you've got to do this. You've got to bring it down. You've got to do an offering. 12th house is an offering that you make to the gods.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I can totally see.
Whereas second house, sorry.
No, go for it. I was gonna butt in.
I went for a very material interpretation of Saturn, because the part of fortune is also there. And the second house is the offerings you make to yourself, whereas the 12th house is offerings you make to others. However, the Moon Saturn issues will continue and will exacerbate the digestive function, because there's a Moon Venus sextile that is going to perfect, right? That in terms of the natal chart, it is moving in that direction. So the signs of Virgo and Scorpio are connected here. It is a wide aspect, But for the moon in a sign where the sun is also there, in a sign where the ascendant ruler is also there, I'm very happy with very wide orbs because the whole sign is activating things in the chart.
Mm.
A major change in food habits was strongly recommended due to Moon-Venus sextile. That said, there's a knock-on effect between the colon and the pancreatic function. And if they wanted to get more information, they should take the gastronomy colonoscopy, which was planned to do, but they were deprioritizing it. The doctors wanted to take the nodes out and look at the lungs. And I'm like, hang on, just sort out the primary issue first. Following the astrology, we go back to the Scorpio and Virgo connection here, which is very apt for this case. Okay.
Mm.
And the client confirmed that the mother had lifelong issue with food and ravenous eating, even in the hospital, like just
Wow.
gulping. So it's showing that really fallen moon state of that hunger, you know. So it is that is played out in the horary chart very neatly, very neatly.
It's super clear. It's lovely example, Nathan, as well, because if you did this chart in the standard northern, just to emphasize again, what you're doing here is you've taken the standard Western tropical chart,
I've got the
and because
chart
this is in the southern
Oh.
hemisphere, this is in South Africa, you've just inverted the signs. So you flip the signs around.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
if you were using the so-called normal Western tropical, we'd have a moon in Taurus and a Saturn in Scorpio, and the Sun and Mercury would be in Taurus, and Venus would be exalted in Pisces, and so and that Mars would be in Gemini, and
Jupiter would be exalted in
yes,
Cancer,
and that would be the chart
glory.
ruler, the exalted Jupiter in Cancer. So there are a few things here that, just as you point out, for me, one of the most convincing things in this chart is the fact that Venus is ruling the 6th in Virgo, and that, as you say, that precisely locates a focus of illness on the pancreas, particularly in that little configuration with the moon and Saturn, as you were just describing. And just an incidental side note, and I know you know this, but I'm going to point this out for the viewer and listener. Mars traditionally was the ruler of appetite. Well, if this chart wasn't inverted, Mars would still be angular, sure, but Mars in Sagittarius is way hotter and more burning than Mars in Gemini is. So it's just a little side note. To me, it's not quite as on the nose as that Venus in Virgo ruling the 6th. Your pancreas has an issue, but it's another little sort of additional point to say, look, this is an angular Mars opposing the ascendant in a fire sign. Excess appetite could be an issue. And if you combine that with the fact that the ruler of the 2nd house of food is in the 6th house, ruled by that Mars, which it would not be if the chart was flipped, then you have a fairly convincing piece of testimony that excess appetite is a cause of problems. And
just to go back for our herbal listeners, I think this is very, very good evidence for the meshing of the horary and the natal chart with the southern tropical zodiac really fits. And so the horary just wouldn't fit as well, and natal wouldn't fit, and they're like hand and glove. And it seems like
that's how they should be.
Exactly.
That's how they should be.
Exactly. So,
and the last point that I made here was that I also suggested that the breathing function is separate from the hypercalcemia. Okay. Anyway, the client confirmed they managed to alleviate the pancreatitis. The nodes turned out to be non-cancerous, and the patient is due for colonoscopy this week.
Amazing. So just a quick point, how did you determine that the breathing function was separate from the hypercalcemia from the birth chart? Was that mainly from the horary, nothing?
That was mainly from the horary, because that was the condition right now, the acute.
Yes. Yeah.
A quick question, Nathan, just on a practical note. Again, I don't know if it happens very often, but I've noticed from astrologers I've talked to, some of them, when they take a horary, will use the location they are when they read the question. Others where the client is. Obviously, this becomes quite salient if you're reversing the horoscope. What's your practice?
100%. So the horary is where I am.
Mm-hmm. And so even if you were taking a client in Paris, they would still reverse the horoscope.
Yes. The question is being born in my mind.
Yes,
Right.
I concur. This is
No, no, it
something that
works for
comes up a
me.
lot, and
Yeah.
it's a traditional point that the astrologer. I always say this isn't my analogy. I think I got it from some other bod like John Frawley or somebody, but they say the astrologer is
Mm.
like a midwife. So the chart, the question isn't born until the astrologer delivers it. So it might be conceived in the mind of the person. I can't remember, maybe one of you guys knows, there's an Australian astrologer, horary astrologer, who did a presentation a few years ago on, he started experimenting with using horary charts at the time and place the person had asked the question, and they seem to work, and I think that's really interesting and good. But my major argument against that is not a theoretical one, because theoretically that might work very well, because we know that conception charts are even more radical than birth charts. Ancient astrology say, if you have the chart of the conception, it's the best. But the issue is kind of parallel. With conception, the difficulty is knowing exactly when it occurred. Same thing with a horary chart. You know, as the astrologer, exactly when you look at that question and you cast the chart for that moment. You don't know. You have to rely on secondary testimony from the client as to when they thought about the question.
Yeah.
So it just introduces one point of error that need not be there. So in my view, probably you could practically revert to the conception time of when somebody came up with the question, but it's,
You see, so I find it very interesting that an astrologer in Australia, the normal way of doing things wasn't working. Find another
yes,
way.
yeah,
So
to your point, Nathan. Yeah, exactly, that's brilliant. All right, well, let's wrap it
that's
up.
the
But
one
thank you
example.
so much for coming on and showing us this, Nathan. It's
Brilliant.
fascinating and super cool.
Thank you, Nathan. That was absolutely fascinating, and I'm definitely going to play around with this system.
Yes, yeah, I did say to you before, Nathan, I tried it with a few charts, and it works definitely. And there've been a couple of clients I've had who were Southern Hemisphere clients, and I flipped the chart and it's fit better. It fit better. So the case here, folks, for anyone who's a bit triggered by this, who's feeling a bit like, oh no, I've got to learn all this new stuff. You don't have to. We think that astrology can work fine if you just use your standard Western thing and you don't flip it. If that's what you want to do, go for your life. It's fine. But what we would encourage you to do is to, if you're willing, to experiment with this and just see how it works. The only thing I'd say, technical point, is be aware that the fixed stars, if you're using them, will still be in their sidereal places. So when you're looking them up, it's sort of so when you're looking them up, obviously, if you've used a southern tropical chart, remember that you flip the signs. So you actually have to kind of like so if you're looking a star that is in 28 tropical Taurus, when you flipped it, it's going to be in 28 tropical Scorpio. So just remember that. That can be a little bit of a brain bender.
I've had that, people say, how can something be in Sagittarius when it's the stars are in, the planet is actually in the constellation of Taurus? I'm like, because one is in the sky and one is a season on Earth.
Yeah, it's no different than the separation between the names of the tropical signs and the actual constellations. Now they're almost separated by an entire sign as it is. So the two things are different.
Your point about the sidereal stars,
Yeah.
Imagine a world where astrologers had to actually look at stars in a sidereal reference. What a surprise!
I know, right? Although I have to say, I would like to do more. I'd like to get into astronomy, because I am as herbalists, we have this thing called brown bottle herbalists, which are herbalists that don't actually grow any plants and just get everything sort of pharmaceutically prepared. And I do have a little garden, and Ollie does as well. So we make some of our own drugs and stuff. But I am a bit of a computer astrologer. I've not done enough astronomy, and that is something I definitely want to work on, because I think once you start observing these things in real life, it changes your perception.
Oh God, yes. Jupiter, very bright on the horizon about 10 o'clock at the moment.
Oh yeah. Actually, when we started the recording, the sun was trining the midheaven from the 6th house. And I thought, we're talking about medical astrology. That makes
Amazing. That works.
Good.
Anyway, super. Right. Thanks, guys. And thank you, everyone. If you've liked all this stuff, please like it, share it, do all the things, and we'll see you in the next one. All right.
Bye-bye.